They called her the Ghost. No official records. No military history anyone could trace.
Entering now.
No identity in any database. But
Copy that.
when Colonel James Steele's multi-million-dollar arms dealing operation crumbled overnight, every high-ranking officer knew exactly who had shattered his empire. Alex Thompson had always operated in the shadows, even before her records were scrubbed from every military database. Before she became the woman whispered about in secure briefing rooms, she understood the most dangerous operators were the ones nobody saw coming. The morning she arrived at Fort Cactus in the Arizona desert, she looked like just another contractor. Worn jeans, a faded jacket, eyes that took in everything but gave nothing away. The base stretched across the desert landscape like a massive military complex. Concrete bunkers and razor wire glinting in the harsh morning sun. Supply trucks rumbled through the main gate in endless processions. They carried equipment that didn't match the manifest, hitting the warehouses that technically didn't exist on any official base map. To most observers,
keep your eyes open, Maya.
It looked like routine military logistics. To someone who knew what to look for, it looked like an operation generating millions in untraceable revenue. Alex had been watching Fort Cactus for 3 months from various observation points in the surrounding hills. She documented vehicle movements, personnel rotations, and the subtle patterns that revealed the base's true purpose. Her handler had been vague about the mission. Investigate irregularities in weapons procurement. Identify key players. Gather evidence. What he hadn't told her was that Colonel James Steele, the base commander, had a reputation for making problems disappear. No trace. No questions. The security checkpoint was her first test. The guard, a young corporal with nervous eyes, scanned her contractor credentials. He paid the kind of attention that suggested he'd been specifically briefed about watching for unusual visitors.
These manifests
the ID showed Alexandra Martinez, civilian logistics specialist. Her background was so thoroughly documented and cross-minus referenced, it would pass any standard verification process.
Why share with a stranger?
It had taken the agency's best forgers 6 months to create an identity this convincing. Purpose of visit? The corporal asked. His screen already displayed the approved work order.
Okay,
the
I've got
equipment
this.
assessment for the Peterson contracts, Alex replied. This cover story would give her temporary access to the base's primary storage facilities with a cleared escort at all times. Should take about a week to complete the full inventory.
Thank you, Colonel.
The guard returned her credentials. She noticed his fingers lingering on the radio clipped to his shoulder. Someone had instructed the gate personnel to report specific types of visitors.
Thompson,
Civilian contractors with access to sensitive areas,
So what is it
even
going
with
to
an
be?
escort,
A glowing
clearly
report?
qualified.
A fat
Within
consultancy?
minutes of entering Fort
Or ruin?
Cactus, Alex knew Colonel Steele was already aware of her presence. The base operations officer who met her at the main administrative building was Captain Maya Rodriguez, a career logistics specialist. Her personnel file showed 15 years of exemplary service and zero political
Extraction in 12
complications. That Alex read people the way most people read newspapers. Captain Rodriguez's body language told a different story. The slight tension in her shoulders, the way her eyes darted toward the colonel's office when she spoke, the careful precision of her words. All indicators of someone operating under significant stress. Miss Martinez, Captain Rodriguez said, leading her through corridors humming with activity. Colonel Steele wanted me to personally ensure you have everything you need for your assessment.
SFC Tony
He's
Blake
very
is your
interested
duplicate
in maintaining
record
the
keeper.
highest
I will arrange
standards
a
of
discreet
inventory
means.
control. I appreciate that, Alex replied. She noted the security cameras positioned at every intersection, the keycard access points that restricted movement between sections,
14 months of
the subtle but
shipments,
unmistakable
bins,
presence of
times,
armed
names.
personnel,
All of it.
not quite dressed like regular military police. Accuracy is crucial in this kind of work. The storage facilities were exactly what
I've got
Alex
it.
expected.
It's all here.
Massive warehouses filled with
I saw the
equipment
armor
ranging from
shipments.
standard
They never made
military
it to the front
supplies
lines.
to hardware
If my
definitely
family
not
is safe,
included in
I
any
will
official
testify.
procurement catalog. Crate Smart was
23
shipping
o'clock
labels
shipment
from
from warehouse
3
7
different
tomorrow.
continents,
Wow.
serial
Steele
numbers
personally
that didn't
oversees
match
big
manufacturer databases, weapon systems supposed to be restricted to specific classified programs. It was a procurement officer's nightmare and an arms dealer's paradise. It was the people that told the real story. Sergeant First Class Tony Blake, the warehouse supervisor, had the hyper-aware demeanor of someone who'd seen too much and understood the consequences of talking. His crew moved through their duties with robotic efficiency, never making eye contact with visitors, never asking questions about the equipment they handled daily. The kind of discipline that came from very clear instructions about what happened to people who showed too much curiosity. Alex spent her first day conducting the legitimate equipment assessment that provided her cover, photographing serial numbers, checking inventory against manifest documents, noting discrepancies with the thorough professionalism of an actual contractor. But she was also mapping the base's security protocols, identifying key personnel, building the foundation for the investigation that would eventually bring down Colonel Steele's operation. That evening, she sat in her assigned quarters, a small room in the civilian contractor barracks. She uploaded her initial observations to a secure server. She used encryption protocols that would make the transmission invisible to standard monitoring systems. The evidence was already substantial. Millions of dollars in unaccounted military hardware, shipping records showing equipment diverted to unauthorized destinations, procurement contracts generating massive cost overruns with no corresponding delivery of actual supplies. But Alex knew documenting financial irregularities wouldn't be enough. Colonel Steele had survived previous audits and Inspector General investigations. He used a combination of political connections at CE, OMNTCOM and the Pentagon, carefully maintained deniability, and systematically getting rid of anyone who posed a genuine threat to his operation. Taking him down would require more than paperwork. It would require exposing the human cost of his corruption. As she prepared for sleep, Alex's secure phone buzzed with an encrypted message from her handler. Steele aware of contractor presence.
Now, regarding the procurement
Recommend
oversight
accelerated
roadmap.
timeline. You're on your own from here. Alex smiled grimly as she deleted the message. It meant she was officially operating without backup, without extraction support, without the safety net most intelligence operatives took for granted. But that also meant she was free to use whatever methods proved necessary to complete the mission. Colonel James Steele had built his criminal empire by exploiting the trust of those under his command.
Indeed.
He destroyed careers, diverted resources from soldiers who needed them, and enriched himself selling weapons meant to protect American interests. Tomorrow, Alex would begin the process of showing him
Colonel,
what happened
no
when that
comment.
system of exploitation encountered someone with no official existence, no career to protect,
What's your
and
reaction?
no rules to follow except the ones she chose for herself. The ghost had arrived at Fort Cactus. Colonel Steele's empire was about to discover why every high-ranking officer had learned to fear the woman who broke their operations. Day 2,
You're looking
the
for
second
any sign
day
of tampering,
at
no matter
Fort
how
Cactus
small.
began with Alex
if it's just a
discovering her
slight
hotel
crease.
room had been
Exactly, that could
searched.
be an indicator.
Nothing was missing. Nothing obviously disturbed. But someone with professional training had gone through her belongings with careful precision. They left subtle signs for those who knew how to read them. The angle of her laptop on the desk shifted to degrees from where she'd left it. The hotel pen moved from the right side of the notepad to the left. Small things most people would never notice. Clear messages to someone
need
in
to talk
Alex's
about what
line of
happened.
work.
I'm
We
ready
know
to
who
listen.
you are. We're watching. We can reach you anywhere. Colonel James Steele was making his first move. Alex arrived at the base that morning to find Captain Maya Rodriguez waiting for her with barely concealed anxiety. The logistics officer's professional demeanor couldn't hide the tension in her voice, or the way her hands trembled slightly as she reviewed the day's inventory schedule. Ms. Martinez, Rodriguez said, using Alex's cover identity. The Colonel has requested that you focus your assessment on Warehouse 7 today. He wants to ensure the particular facility receives the most thorough evaluation. Warehouse 7th, according to the base schematics Alex had studied, it was the smallest storage facility on base, officially designated for routine maintenance supplies. But Alex had observed enough truck traffic in and out of that building to know it contained something significantly more valuable than replacement parts and cleaning supplies. Of course,
Contractor, extra watch?
Alex replied, I appreciate the Colonel's attention to detail. As they walked toward the warehouse, Rodriguez glanced around nervously before speaking in a lower voice. Ms. Martinez, I need to ask you something. I need you to be completely honest with me. Are you really here for an equipment assessment? Alex studied the captain's face. She read the desperation behind the question. Rodriguez wasn't just nervous about a routine audit. She was afraid. The kind of fear that came from knowing too much about operations that officially didn't exist. Why would you ask that? Alex replied carefully. Because in the 15 years I've been stationed at various bases, I've never seen an independent contractor generate this much command attention. Colonel Steele has had me pull your background file 3 times, requested security updates on your activities every 4 hours, and assigned additional personnel to monitor your access to sensitive areas. That's not normal procedure for an equipment assessment. Alex realized Captain Rodriguez might be more than just another officer caught in Steele's web. She might be someone looking for a way out. Captain Rodriguez, in your experience, what would generate that kind of command attention? Someone who poses a threat to ongoing operations that can't be officially acknowledged. Rodriguez's voice was barely above a whisper. Ms. Martinez, I've been the logistics officer here for 2 years. I've seen things. Sign papers for shipments that don't match their contents. Process payment authorizations for equipment that never arrives at its designated destination. If you're here to investigate irregularities in procurement procedures, you need to understand that those irregularities go all the way to the top. They had reached Warehouse 7. Alex could see armed security personnel positioned at both entrances. Far more protection than routine maintenance supplies would require. But she also noticed something else. The security wasn't just keeping unauthorized personnel out. It was keeping authorized personnel from seeing what was inside. Captain Rodriguez, how long has it been since you've actually conducted a physical inventory of this warehouse? 6 months. Colonel Steele implemented new security protocols that require his personal authorization for any detailed inspection of this facility. As the base logistics officer, I should have complete access to all storage areas. But this warehouse has become off-minus limits to regular personnel. Alex approached the warehouse entrance. She noted the sophisticated electronic locks, the reinforced door frames, and the subtle but unmistakable signs of recent construction that had upgraded the facility's security far beyond standard military specifications. When the guard checked her credentials, she noticed his radio chatter included specific code words not part of standard-based communication protocols. Inside Warehouse 7, Alex found exactly what she'd expected. Weapons and equipment definitely not part of any legitimate military procurement program. Crates of small arms with serial numbers filed off. Communication equipment marked with foreign manufacturer stamps. Vehicle parts that matched intelligence reports about weapon systems being illegally exported to unauthorized foreign buyers. It was a smuggling operation masquerading as a legitimate military supply depot. But the real revelation came when Alex noticed Captain Rodriguez's reaction to the warehouse contents. The logistics officer's face showed not surprise, but resignation. The expression of someone who had been forced to process paperwork for equipment she knew was being diverted for illegal purposes. Captain, Alex said quietly, how many other officers know about this? More than you might think. Fewer than you'd hope. Rodriguez checked to ensure the guards were out of earshot. Major Jennifer Hayes, the previous logistics officer, tried to report irregularities 18 months ago. She submitted detailed documentation to the Inspector General's office about shipments that don't match manifests, payment authorizations for non-minus existent suppliers, and procurement contracts that generated massive cost overruns. What happened to her?
Take it.
Transfer orders came through suddenly. One day she was preparing her evidence for a formal investigation. The next day she was assigned to a desk job processing supply requests at a base in Alaska. Rodriguez's voice carried the bitterness of someone who understood how thoroughly the system could be manipulated. Colonel Steele told the senior officers that she'd requested the transfer for family reasons, but everyone knew better. Alex photographed serial numbers and shipping labels. She maintained the appearance of conducting a
Steele is
routine
here.
inventory, but her mind was processing the larger implications of what Rodriguez had revealed. Colonel Steele wasn't just running an arms-dealing operation. He was systematically silencing anyone who threatened to expose it. He used his position and connections to destroy careers and eliminate threats. Miss Martinez, Rodriguez said as they completed the warehouse inspection, "I need to ask you something else. Are you planning to report what you found
James
here?"
Steele.
Alex looked at the captain directly.
You to 35
Would you want me
years.
to? I've been asking myself that question for 2 years. Every time I process paperwork for equipment I know is being diverted for illegal purposes. Every time I authorize payments for supplies that'll
Always
never
remember,
reach the soldiers who
procurement
need them.
integrity is not just a
Every
policy.
time I stay
It
silent
is the
because speaking up
bedrock of
means
our
destroying my
operations.
career and my family's future. Rodriguez's voice carried 15 years of military service and the weight of compromises that had slowly corroded her sense of purpose. Major Hayes was a good officer. She paid the price for trying to do the right thing, but good soldiers are dying because they don't have the equipment that's being sold for Colonel Steele's profit. Alex understood she found more than just evidence of corruption. She found someone who was ready to fight back. Captain Rodriguez wasn't just another victim of Steele's system. She was a potential ally, one who had access to the kind of internal documentation that could bring down the entire operation. That evening, as Alex compiled her findings in her hotel room, she realized Colonel Steele's empire was both more extensive and more vulnerable than she had initially assessed. The corruption reached into multiple levels of the command structure, but it also depended on the silence and complicity of officers increasingly uncomfortable with their roles in the system. Tomorrow, she would begin the process of turning that discomfort into active resistance. Day 3. The third morning at Fort Cactus brought with it a message that changed everything.
These are all the records of payments
Alex
to
found the
Desert
note
Shield
slipped under
Logistics.
her hotel room sometime before dawn. No signature. No identifying marks. Just an address in the town of Copper Ridge, 20 miles from the base, and the time 1400 hours. The handwriting was careful, precise, the kind taught in military academies and refined through years of official correspondence. Someone wanted to meet. They wanted to do it far from Colonel Steele's surveillance network. Alex spent the morning conducting routine inventory work. She maintained her cover while her mind analyzed the possibilities. The note could be a trap. An attempt by Steele to lure her into a compromising situation away from the relative safety of the base. It could also be exactly what it appeared to be. Someone with information too afraid to make contact within Steele's sphere of influence. At precisely 1400 hours, Alex sat in a corner booth at Murphy's Diner in Copper Ridge, a place that served coffee strong enough to wake the deadened pie locals claimed was worth the 30-mile drive from Tucson. The restaurant was nearly empty in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon. Just a few truckers and an elderly couple sharing a late lunch. Perfect for a conversation that needed to remain private. The woman who slid into the opposite side of the booth was not what Alex had expected. Major Jennifer Hayes looked exactly like her personnel file photograph. Sharp features, intelligent eyes, graying hair pulled back in a regulation bun. But there was something in her posture not captured in official documentation. A weariness that came from surviving a calculated campaign to end her career. "Miss Martinez," Hayes said, using Alex's cover identity. "Or should I call you something else?" "Martinez will work fine," Alex replied. She studied the former Fort Cactus logistics officer. "I understand you have some experience with equipment irregularities." Hayes smiled grimly. "That's one way to put it.
You need to see this.
I also have experience with what happens when you try to report those irregularities through official
Past
channels."
investigators were
She
silenced.
pulled out a manila folder thick with documents. 18 months of evidence.
Offer deleted.
Shipping manifests that don't match cargo contents. Payment authorizations for suppliers that don't exist. Procurement contracts that
ordered to
generate
testify
millions in
against
overruns while
Alex.
delivering substandard equipment to troops in the field. Alex flipped through the documentation. She recognized the pattern she'd begun to identify during her own investigation. But Hayes' evidence was far more comprehensive. It showed a systematic operation that had diverted tens of millions of dollars in military equipment over a multi-year period. "This is extensive," Alex said, Why didn't the Inspector General's investigation follow through? Because Colonel Steele has friends in places that matter. Connections at CNTCOM and the Pentagon. Hayes' voice carried the bitterness of someone who had learned
Target
exactly
acquired. Initiate
how the
strike on my
military
mark.
justice system could be manipulated. 3 days after I submitted my report, I received new orders transferring me to Elmendorf Air Base in Alaska.
Signed and done.
Effective immediately. No appeals process. No explanation beyond needs of the service. And my evidence? Hayes paused. Officially
Execute.
lost in a computer system malfunction. The Inspector General's office expressed regret about the technical difficulties, and that resulted
On
in the
all
complete
charges,
corruption of my files.
court finds the
Hayes leaned
defendant
forward,
guilty.
lowering her voice. That I kept copies. And I
These
kept
new measures are
investigating
designed
even
to
after my
strengthen our
transfer.
commitment to
Colonel
transparency
Steele's
and
operation isn't
accountability.
limited to Fort Cactus. He's got connections at
investigation
bases
into the
across
Fort
the
Cactus fraud
Southwest.
began with an
A
anonymous
network
tip.
of suppliers and contractors who
uncovered a
facilitate the
complex
diversion of
network of
military
shell
equipment
companies.
for private sale. Alex studied the shipping records. She noted patterns that confirmed her suspicions about the scope of Steele's criminal enterprise. Equipment requisitioned for
Next.
training exercises that never occurred. Replacement parts ordered for vehicles officially decommissioned. Weapon systems purchased with emergency procurement authorization that bypassed normal oversight procedures. Major Hayes, why are you sharing this with me? You don't know who I am or what my real purpose might be. Hayes was quiet for a long moment. She stared out the diner window at the desert landscape stretching toward the horizon. Because 18 months ago, I was a career logistics
Anytime we ask
officer who believed the
questions,
system would protect people who tried
they
to do
got
the right thing.
reassigned.
I learned I was wrong. But I also learned that staying silent makes you complicit in whatever you're trying to avoid.
There have been others
She
who
pulled
tried
out
to
another
investigate.
document. This one marked with official letterhead from the Department of Defense Inspector General's office.
Not finished
This
yet.
arrived last week. They're reopening the investigation into procurement irregularities
threatened
at
me,
Fort
so I brought
Cactus,
these documents
based
for
on
you.
new evidence from multiple sources. Alex realized her mission had just become significantly more complex. She wasn't the only person investigating Steele's operation. This meant either multiple agencies were pursuing the same target or someone else had reached similar conclusions about the extent of the corruption. Major, do you have any idea who might be providing this new evidence? I have suspicions. Captain Rodriguez has been asking very careful questions about procurement procedures. The kind of questions that suggest she's documenting irregularities for someone. Sergeant Blake, the warehouse supervisor, has been making copies of shipping
Convoy arrived at
manifests
Warehouse
that
7.
officially don't exist.
Steele is
And
on
there have been
site.
reports of civilian contractors conducting unusually detailed equipment assessments. Hayes slid the folder across the table. This is everything I've been able to gather about Colonel Steele's operation. Names,
Move in.
dates, financial records, testimony from personnel who were transferred or disciplined after asking inconvenient questions. If someone's finally in a position to take action, they'll need
Execute.
comprehensive evidence that can't be dismissed or buried.
I sentenced you to
Alex accepted
35
the folder.
years.
She understood she was now in possession of documentation that could either bring down a criminal enterprise or get her
everyone.
killed
Today
if it
we're
fell
going
into
to
the wrong
discuss
hands.
the new logistics reform initiative.
Major, what do you want to see happen here?
It's all
I want
about
justice for
making
the
sure we
soldiers
get
who
the
didn't
best
receive
value
equipment they
for our
needed because
resources.
Colonel Steele was selling it for profit. I want accountability for the officers who were punished for trying to expose the truth. And I want to make sure no one else has to choose between their career and their conscience, because some colonel thinks his personal enrichment is more important than military integrity. As they prepared to leave the diner, Hayes offered one final piece of advice. Ms. Martinez, whoever you really are, be very careful. Colonel Steele has survived previous investigations because he
Another
eliminates
discrepancy.
threats before they
Logged.
can become problems. Major Anderson, to question discrepancies in vehicle procurement, transferred to a training base in North Dakota. Captain Williams, who reported irregularities in communications equipment orders,
After I
reassigned to
reported the
administrative
fraud, they
duties in
reassigned me
Germany.
to a dead-end office.
Lieutenant Morrison, who documented shipping manifest inconsistencies,
Cooperate,
received
Alex,
a medical
or you
board
will spend the rest
evaluation
of your life
resulting
in a
in
maximum
separation.
security prison.
Alex understood the warning. Colonel Steele's method of operation was
Finish this.
systematic intimidation backed by the power to destroy careers and lives. But she also understood something else. The pattern of transfers and reassignments had created a
ordered to
network of
testify
disaffected
against you.
officers. They possessed detailed knowledge of the corruption, and they might be ready to provide testimony if they believe justice was actually possible. That evening,
Here are the
Alex
logs.
sat in her hotel room, reading through Hayes' documentation and cross-referencing it with her own observations. The evidence was overwhelming. But she also knew evidence alone wouldn't be sufficient to bring down someone with Steele's connections and ruthlessness. She would need to force him into a position where his criminal activities became impossible to deny or cover up. The pattern was clear. Colonel Steele had built his operation by exploiting the trust and loyalty of military personnel while systematically destroying anyone who threatened to expose him. But patterns could be broken. Alex was beginning to see exactly how to turn Steele's own methods against him. Tomorrow, she would begin implementing a strategy that would either bring down the most extensive military procurement fraud in decades, or confirm why they called her the Ghost. Day 4. The fourth day at Fort Cactus began with Colonel James Steele making his intentions unmistakably clear.
Guilty!
Alex arrived at the base to find her contractor credentials had been temporarily suspended pending security verification.
Today,
Her access to sensitive areas revoked. She was being escorted everywhere by armed military police who maintained the polite fiction they were providing enhanced security support rather than surveillance. Colonel Steele had decided Alexandra Martinez, civilian contractor, had seen enough of Fort Cactus's operations. Miss Martinez, Captain Rodriguez approached with obvious reluctance, flanked by two MPs whose hands rested casually near their sidearms. Colonel Steele has requested an immediate meeting to discuss the status of your equipment assessment. Alex understood the subtext. This wasn't a meeting. It was an interrogation, designed to determine exactly how much she knew and how much of a threat she represented. Steele was moving from passive observation to active intimidation. This meant he was either confident in his ability to neutralize her or desperate enough to take significant risks. The walk to Steele's office provided Alex with an opportunity to observe the base's security posture. What she saw confirmed her suspicions about the colonel's state of mind. Additional personnel had been assigned to monitor the warehouse areas. Communication protocols had been upgraded to include coded references that suggested heightened threat awareness. And the general atmosphere among base personnel carried the tension of people who knew something significant was happening but didn't understand what. Colonel Steele's office was exactly what Alex expected from a man who valued power more than purpose. Oversized furniture designed to intimidate visitors. Walls covered with photographs showing him with various political and military dignitaries. A desk positioned to force anyone sitting across from him to look up at a disadvantageous angle. But Alex also noticed details not part of the standard command presence playbook. A secure phone system that bypassed normal base communications. A wall safe considerably larger than regulation specifications. And computer equipment that included civilian encryption hardware, not typically found in military offices.
Move it, people! We don't
Miss
have all
Martinez,
night.
Colonel Steele stood as she entered. His smile carried all the warmth of a shark evaluating potential prey. I trust your assessment has been proceeding satisfactorily. Very satisfactorily, Colonel. Your base operates with impressive efficiency.
Execute.
Alex chose her words carefully, maintaining the professional demeanor of a contractor while studying Steele's reactions to subtle probes. I'm pleased to hear that. However, I understand there may be been some confusion about the scope of your evaluation. Perhaps we should clarify exactly what areas require your attention and which fall outside your mandate. Steele's tone remained pleasant.
Yes, Sergeant.
But his eyes carried a warning that was anything but friendly. I'm happy to adjust my assessment parameters based on your guidance, Colonel. Excellent. Steele opened a folder on his desk. It revealed photographs that made Alex's blood run cold. Pictures of her eating with Major Hayes at Murphy's Diner. Surveillance images of her hotel room, documentation of her real identity that no civilian contractor should possess. The revelation that Steele knew her real identity meant her cover was completely blown. It meant he had access to intelligence resources far beyond what a base commander should normally possess. But it also meant he was confident enough to reveal how extensively he'd been monitoring her activities. I'm not sure I understand what you're suggesting, Colonel. What I'm suggesting, Ms. Martinez,
If you
or
go
should I
through
call
with
you
this,
Miss
Alex,
Thompson,
I will
is that you're
expose
not
you
here
and
to
make sure
conduct
your
an
career
equipment
is utterly
assessment.
ruined.
What I'm suggesting is that you're here to gather intelligence about base operations that are classified far above your security clearance level. And what I'm suggesting is that you're operating under
Steele's
false
ultimatum
credentials in
stands.
violation of multiple federal statutes that could result in very serious criminal charges. Alex
duplicated all the
realized
records
Steele
from the
was
last
offering
6
her a
months.
choice. Abandon
It's
her
time someone blew the
investigation and
whistle.
disappear quietly, or face arrest and prosecution that would effectively end any chance of exposing his criminal enterprise.
Okay.
It was the same choice he'd given Major Hayes and every other officer who had threatened his operation. Submit to intimidation, or face systematic destruction. Colonel, I think there may be some misunderstanding about my purpose here. Oh, I don't think there's any misunderstanding at all. Steele leaned back in his chair,
Confirmed.
clearly
Steele is
enjoying the
leading.
moment of revealing his superior position. You see, Miss Thompson, I've been dealing with people like you for several years now. Government investigators, Inspector General representatives, ambitious officers looking to make their careers by exposing
Clear the
alleged
perimeter.
irregularities
Move
in
in
base
now.
operations. They all make the same mistake. They assume that documentation and evidence are sufficient to bring
Execute.
down someone with proper preparation and appropriate connections. And what happened to these previous investigators? Some
I sentence
accepted
you to
reassignment to
35 years.
positions more suitable to their skill levels. Others discovered their security clearances had
Our
been
reform
revoked
agenda
due to concerns
introduces
about their judgment and
comprehensive new oversight
reliability.
mechanisms.
A few found their personal lives became subject to scrutiny
time
that revealed
everybody
behavior
officially,
incompatible with continued government
We had
service.
a case study
Steele's
about
smile
procurement-
widened,
procurement
but
fraud.
all of them eventually understood that pursuing investigations into Fort Cactus's operations wasn't in their best interests. Alex understood she was receiving the detailed explanation of how Steele eliminated threats, delivered with the confidence of someone who had never been successfully challenged. But she also understood his willingness to reveal his methods suggested he was planning to use them against her immediately. Colonel, what exactly are you proposing? I'm proposing that you complete your equipment assessment with findings that show Fort Cactus operates in full compliance with all applicable regulations. I'm proposing that you submit a report recommending continued confidence in current base management, and
Steele's
proposing that
allies
you accept
buried
a
those
very generous
investigations.
consultant
They made
contract
sure no one
that'll
ever saw the
compensate you
evidence.
handsomely for your professional expertise and
I can
discretion.
make you a very
The
wealthy
offer
woman,
was sophisticated.
or I can make your
Rather
life
than
a
simply
living
threatening
hell.
her, Steele was providing financial incentive to become complicit in his operation. It was the same approach he'd
ends
probably
here.
used with contractors, suppliers, and base personnel who had discovered aspects of his criminal enterprise. And if I decline your proposal, then you'll discover that conducting fraudulent investigations under false
These are the
credentials
financial logs
is a
from
federal
Desert
crime
Shield.
punishable by significant
add
prison
up.
time. You'll also discover that people who make false accusations against respected military officers often find their personal lives subject to very uncomfortable scrutiny. Steele's voice hardened. Major Hayes learned these lessons. So, did the other investigators who thought they could challenge operations? They didn't understand. Alex realized she had reached the point of no return. Steele had revealed his hand completely, offering her the same choice that had neutralized
the
previous
convoy.
threats to his operation. But he had also made a critical
Move it out.
mistake. He had assumed she was bound by the same constraints that had limited previous
it out.
investigators. Colonel, I appreciate your offer. I need some time to consider my options. Of course, but don't take too long, Miss Thompson. Opportunities like this have limited availability, and I'd hate for
Execute.
you to miss the chance to resolve this situation amicably.
Steele,
As Alex
this court
left
sentences
Steele's
you to
office,
35 years.
escorted by the same MPS who had brought her there, she understood the colonel
Our
had just
objective is
declared
clear.
war.
We will
He was
identify,
confident his combination of
investigate,
threats and bribes
dismantle
would
all
eliminate
forms
her
of
as
corruption
effectively
within our
as they had
ranks.
eliminated previous investigators.
Always
But Colonel
cross-reference
Steele had
invoices
never
with
encountered
delivery
someone with
receipts.
no official existence, no career to protect, and no rules to follow except the ones she chose for herself. The trap had been set. Alex was beginning to suspect Steele might have misjudged who was the hunter and who was the prey. Day 5. A secure phone in Alex's hotel room buzzed at 200 hours. It jolted her from the light sleep
Alex,
that had
it is
become
good
her
to see
standard
you.
operating procedure since
Maya.
arriving at Fort Cactus. The encrypted message was brief but urgent. Asset compromised. Extraction available within 12 hours. Confirm status. Her handler was offering her a way out. Recognition that Colonel Steele's discovery of her real identity had fundamentally changed the risk parameters of the mission. Standard operational protocol called for immediate withdrawal when cover was blown. Regrouping for a different approach with new assets and alternative methods. It was the safe choice, the professional choice, the choice that would preserve valuable intelligence resources for future operations. Alex deleted the message without responding. Instead, she spent the pre-dawn hours analyzing the intelligence she gathered and planning her next moves. Steele's confidence in his invulnerability had led him to reveal far more about his operation than he probably intended. Providing her with exactly the kind of detailed information she needed to bring down his entire network. But she also knew she was now operating on borrowed time. Steele would expect an answer to his ultimatum soon. He would have contingency plans for dealing with investigators who refused his generous offers. The morning brought an unexpected development. Captain Rodriguez appeared at Alex's hotel room door at 600 hours, out of uniform. Clearly operating outside official channels. Her face showed the strain of someone who had spent the night wrestling with decisions that could destroy her career and her family's future. Ms. Thompson, Rodriguez said, using Alex's real name with deliberate emphasis. We need to talk, not on the base. Not where Colonel Steele's people can monitor the conversation. They met an hour later at a truck stop 15 miles from Fort Cactus. They sat in Rodriguez's personal vehicle with the radio tuned to a country music station that would mask their conversation from any potential surveillance equipment. The captain's hands trembled slightly as she lit her third cigarette of the morning. Nay, habit Alex suspected had developed recently under the stress of her current situation. Colonel Steele called me into his office last night. He told me that you're some kind of government investigator, that you've been gathering intelligence about base operations under false pretenses. He also told me that I could face criminal charges for providing you with access to classified facilities, unless I cooperate fully with base security to document your activities. Lex understood the position Rodriguez was in. Another officer being forced to choose between her principles and her survival. What kind of cooperation is he expecting? Complete documentation of every conversation we've had. Copies of any materials I may be shared with you. Testimony about your behavior and questions during facility tours. Basically, he wants me to provide evidence that you've been conducting an authorized intelligence gathering that violates federal law.
They transferred me to Alaska.
Rodriguez was quiet for a long moment. She stared through the windshield at the desert landscape. 15 years ago, when I took my oath as an officer, I swore to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I didn't swear to protect criminals who steal from our own troops and threaten anyone who tries to stop them. Alex realized Rodriguez had made her choice, but she also understood the enormous personal cost involved. Captain, if you decide to help me, there's no going back. Steele has demonstrated his ability to destroy careers and lives of people who oppose him. I know. I've been watching him do it for 2 years. Rodriguez pulled out a manila envelope thick with documents. These are copies of every shipping manifest, payment authorization, and procurement order that I processed for Colonel Steele's special operations. I've also documented the discrepancies between official equipment inventories and actual base assets. It's enough evidence to prove systematic diversion of military property for unauthorized purposes. The documents Rodriguez provided were exactly what Alex needed. Comprehensive financial records that showed the scope and method of Steele's criminal enterprise. But they also represented Rodriguez's complete commitment to the investigation, burning every bridge that might have allowed her to retreat to safety if the operation failed. Captain, there's something else you should know.
Execute.
I'm not the only person investigating Colonel Steele's operation.
Colonel James Steele.
There are other assets,
This court sentences you to
other
35
sources of
years in
evidence,
federal prison.
and support from levels high enough in the command structure to provide protection for witnesses
This
who
new
cooperate
task
with the
force represents
investigation.
a critical step
Major
forward
Hayes
in our
mentioned
strategic
that the Inspector
reforms.
General's office has
All right,
reopened
team.
their inquiry.
Let's talk about procurement
Is that
integrity.
connected to your investigation?
for everything
The
we do here.
investigations are coordinated. Lex said carefully. She wasn't revealing the full extent of the multi-agency task force building the case against Steele. But they're also dependent on testimony from base personnel who have direct knowledge of the criminal activities. Rodriguez nodded. She understood she was being asked to put her career and potentially her life on the line to provide that testimony. What do you need from me? Access to Colonel Steele's private files. Documentation of his off-base meetings with civilian contractors. And testimony about the intimidation tactics he's used against base personnel. Alex paused, making sure Rodriguez understood the full implications. I also need you to continue operating normally, maintaining your position as logistics officer while secretly documenting evidence. It's going to require lying to your commanding officer.
You're looking at a very
and potentially
long
placing
prison
yourself in
sentence,
significant
Alex.
personal danger. And if I refuse, if I decide
what I
that
start.
protecting my family and my career is more important than stopping Steele's operation, Alex looked directly at Rodriguez. Then good soldiers LL continue to die because they don't receive the equipment that's being sold for Steele's personal profit. Other officers LL continue to
This
be
is how they
transferred
laundered
or
money.
punished
I
for
see.
trying to do the right thing. And Colonel Steele will expand his criminal enterprise because you'll know that intimidation works. The decision point had arrived. Alex could see Rodriguez weighing the competing demands of personal safety and professional duty. It was the same calculation every whistleblower faced. The same choice between complicity and courage that defined moral character under pressure. There's one more thing, Rodriguez said. Sergeant Blake, the warehouse supervisor, has been keeping duplicate records of all equipment transfers for the past year. He's afraid of what might happen if the official records disappear or get modified. So he's been maintaining his own documentation as insurance. He might be willing to provide testimony if he believes protection is available. Lex understood Rodriguez had just identified another potential ally. Someone else who had been documenting Steele's criminal activities out of self-preservation, rather than investigative intent. But she also understood that building a
Sentence
network
is
of
35
cooperating
years.
witnesses would make them all more vulnerable to Steele's retaliation if he discovered the extent of the conspiracy against him. Captain, can you arrange a meeting with Sergeant Blake somewhere off-base, secure from surveillance? Yes,
Let's
but
make sure we're
we'll
always
have to be very
double-checking those
careful.
records.
Colonel Steele has been monitoring base personnel communications, and he's got informants among the staff who report unusual activities as they prepared to leave the truck stop. Alex felt the familiar sensation of an operation reaching critical momentum. She now had documentary evidence, insider access, and cooperating witnesses who could provide the kind of detailed testimony that would be impossible to dismiss or discredit. But she also knew Colonel Steele was preparing his own counter-minus moves, and that the next phase of the conflict would determine whether justice prevailed or whether another criminal officer successfully eliminated the threats to his operation. Base 6. The meeting with Sergeant
A task
First
force
Class
has been
Oni
formed.
Blake took place in
We're
an
reopening
abandoned
the
gas
case.
station, 20-5 miles from Fort Cactus. A
I
location
have
chosen
seen
for its
promising
isolation and the
careers
multiple
ruined
escape routes it
by
offered
misguided
if the gathering was
whistleblowers.
discovered. Blake arrived 30 minutes early. He positioned his vehicle to provide rapid departure options, and spent the time before the meeting scanning the horizon for surveillance teams. The behavior of someone who understood exactly how dangerous his cooperation could become. Alex studied Blake as he approached the rendezvous point. The warehouse
These are the
supervisor
details
was
for
an
the next shipment.
18-year
Precise
veteran, the
and
kind of
verified.
NCO who kept the military running. But his posture carried the weight of someone who had seen too much and understood too well the consequences of standing up to the brass. Miss Thompson, Blake said, using her real name with the same deliberate emphasis Captain Rodriguez had employed. Captain Rodriguez says you're investigating irregularities in base procurement operations. That's right, Sergeant. I heard you might have something useful. Blake pulled out a worn notebook. Its pages filled with handwritten entries in the precise block letters taught in military correspondence courses. For the past 14 months, I've been keeping duplicate records of every shipment that moves through our warehouse facilities. Not because I was planning to cause trouble, but because I wanted protection if questions were ever asked about missing equipment or unauthorized transfers. Alex flipped through the notebook. She recognized immediately that Blake's documentation was extraordinary in its detail and comprehensive variances. Every entry
Colonel
included
James Steele,
dates,
On the
times,
charge of dereliction
shipping
of duty, we
manifests,
find you
vehicle
guilty.
identification numbers, and personnel involved
Today
in
we
each
introduce our new
transfer.
procurement oversight
It was the
division,
kind of
designed to
meticulous
streamline
record minus
operations and
keeping that
ensure
could
accountability
reconstruct the
across
entire
all
scope of
departments.
Steele's operation. Sergeant, this is incredibly detailed work.
Recognizing fraud often
What
involves
made you
looking
start
for
keeping these
discrepancies in
records?
data.
About 15 months ago, Colonel Steele started implementing new procedures for handling certain categories of equipment. Shipments that arrived with standard documentation, but were immediately transferred to special storage areas. Inventory that was officially recorded as routine supplies, but was actually weapons and communications equipment. Paymount authorizations for equipment that never arrived but somehow generated invoices for full delivery. Blake's voice carried the frustration of a professional who took pride in maintaining accurate records, but was being forced to process paperwork he knew was fraudulent. As the senior warehouse supervisor, I'm responsible for ensuring equipment matches manifests.
The
But
evidence,
Steele's new procedures
it's
made
all
that
lost.
impossible. The paperwork never matched what actually moved through my warehouse.
Resist
Did you
me,
report it?
and
I'll
your career
exist.
is over.
Blake laughed bitterly. To who? Steele owns this base. The last NCO who filed a complaint got transferred to Fort Polk in the middle of hurricane season. His family's still trying to sell their house here. Alex understood. Blake wasn't just providing evidence. He was risking everything. Sergeant, if this goes south, ma'am, I've got 18 years in for deployments. Lost 3 good soldiers because they didn't have the armor that was supposedly shipped to our FOB. Blake's jaw tightened. Turns out that armor was sold to some cartel in Mexico. So yeah, I know the risks, but I'm done being part of this. Blake pulled out another document. This one was a printout of financial transactions he'd managed to access through the base's internal network. These are Paymount records for the past 6 months.
Steele is here.
Every time we receive a shipment that doesn't match its manifest, there's a corresponding payment to a company
Faster,
called
you
Desert Shield
imbeciles!
Logistics. It's registered in Nevada, but the actual ownership is hidden behind a dozen shell corporations. How did you get access to these financial records? I've been here long enough to know which systems are properly secured, and which junior officers leave their passwords written on sticky notes under their keyboards. Blake's expression was grim. Colonel Steele thinks enlisted personnel are too stupid or too scared to understand what's happening. He's wrong on both counts. Alex
morning.
studied the financial
Today, we announced the
records.
formation of a new
They showed a clear
anti-corruption
pattern
task
of
force,
payments
a critical
that
step towards
coincided
greater
with the
accountability
diversion
within
of
our
military
ranks.
equipment.
Remember, the key to
Combined
fraud
with
detection
Blake's
is
shipping
always
documentation and
cross-referencing
Rodriguez's
information.
procurement records, it created an undeniable trail of criminal activity. Sergeant Blake, would you be willing to testify about what you've witnessed? Ma'am, I'll do whatever it takes to stop this, but I need to know my family will be protected. I've got a wife and the kids. Colonel Steele has made it clear what happens to people who cross in. I can arrange for protection, but it'll mean leaving Fort Cactus immediately. Can you do that? Blake nodded. I've already got my family staying with relatives in Colorado. Told them it was a vacation, but they know something's up. As they prepare to leave the abandoned gas station, Blake offered one final piece of intelligence.
Steele
There's
has
something else you should
allies
know.
in the Pentagon.
Tomorrow night,
Don't underestimate
there's a
them,
major
Alex.
shipment scheduled to leave Warehouse 7. 3 trucks loaded with weapons that are officially
We both
being
know what
sent
will
for
happen if
destruction,
this information
but are
gets out.
actually heading to a buyer in Mexico. Colonel Steele will be personally overseeing the transfer. He
No
always
retreat.
does for the big shipments. Alex realized this was the opportunity she'd been waiting for. A chance to catch Steele directly involved in the criminal activity, not just benefiting from it, but actively participating in it.
details all of their
What
shell
time is
company.
the shipment scheduled? 2300 hours. They always move the illegal shipments at night. Fewer witnesses. And the gate guards on the night shift are all Steele's people. That evening, Alex met with Captain Rodriguez one more time. They sat in Rodriguez's car in a shopping center parking lot, surrounded by enough civilian traffic to make surveillance difficult. Captain, I need you to do something that could be very dangerous. What do you need? Access to Colonel Steele's computer. Specifically, his personal files related to Desert Shield logistics and the shipments scheduled for tomorrow night. Rodriguez was quiet for a moment. He keeps his office locked when he's not there, and there are security cameras in the corridor. Can you get around them? There's a maintenance window every night from 200 to 230 when the security system reboots. It's the only time the cameras are offline. And if I'm caught, if you're caught, Colonel Steele will know we're moving against him. But without those files, we might not have enough evidence to guarantee a conviction.
We must ensure that those who come forward
Rodriguez
are protected.
nodded. I'll do it. But after tomorrow night, regardless of what happens, I'm done. I can't keep living this double life. Alex understood. The stress of maintaining her cover while gathering evidence was taking its toll on Rodriguez. It was time to bring the operation to a conclusion. Day 7 minus the fall. The 7th day at Fort Cactus began before dawn. At 215 hours, Captain Rodriguez successfully accessed Colonel Steele's office during the security systems maintenance window. She downloaded files that detailed 5 years of illegal arms sales, complete with buyer information, payment records, and the names of every military and civilian conspirator in the network. By 300, those files were in Alex's hands and uploaded to secure servers at multiple federal agencies. At
The server logs were
600,
wiped clean. A deliberate
Alex
deletion of
received a
every
message from
trace.
her handler: strike teams in position. Await your signal. The
Careers
day
have a way of
proceeded with
vanishing,
surreal
Alex,
normalcy.
when people choose
Colonel
to be
Steele held his
uncooperative.
morning staff meeting, unaware that half the officers present were now cooperating with federal investigators. He reviewed
way
the
out for
base's
him.
operational status, discussed upcoming training exercises,
threatened my family
and
if I
reminded
didn't
everyone
cooperate.
about the importance of maintaining security protocols.
Here
The
is
irony
everything.
wasn't lost on anyone in the room.
It's all here.
Alex
Shell
spent the
firms,
day finalizing her
laundered money.
evidence packages.
It connects everything.
She had shipping manifests from Sergeant Blake, financial records from Captain Rodriguez, historical documentation from Major Hayes, and now Colonel Steele's own files detailing the entire criminal enterprise. It was enough to ensure convictions for everyone involved. At 2100 hours, Alex positioned herself on a hill overlooking Warehouse 7th. Through night vision equipment, she watched as Colonel Steele arrived to personally supervise the illegal shipment. 3 trucks were being loaded with weapons that had been officially designated for destruction. Steele was
people, we
directing
don't
the
have all
operation
night.
himself, confident in his control of the base and his ability to eliminate any threats. At 20 to 50
FBI.
hours, Alex sent a
FBI,
single
hands up,
encrypted
hands
message
up.
execute.
You're under
What
arrest.
happened next was coordinated with military precision. FBI agents, military police, and federal marshals moved simultaneously on Fort Cactus and 5 other military installations.
Colonel James
They
Steele.
had arrest warrants
I
for
hereby
40 minus
sentence you
3
to
individuals
35
involved in the
years.
arms trafficking network. The operation had been months in planning,
Reflex.
but Alex's intelligence had provided the final
Whistleblower
pieces needed to
Protection
ensure
Act is a
success.
landmark
Colonel
piece of
Steele was standing
legislation.
next to the lead truck,
Now we are going to
signing
look for any
transfer documents.
discrepancies in
When the
billing
strike team
information.
surrounded Warehouse 7th,
Excuse me, sir.
the look
Where
of
do we
shock
find that
on his face
information? Right
quickly
here.
transformed into rage as he realized what was happening. Colonel James Steele, the lead FBI agent, announced, "You're under arrest for conspiracy to traffic arms, theft of government property, violation of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, and conspiracy to obstruct justice." As they placed him in handcuffs, Steele's eyes searched the darkness beyond the warehouse lights. He was looking for the source of his downfall, looking for the ghost who had destroyed his empire. Alex watched from her position on the hill as Steele was led away. She felt no satisfaction, only a grim sense of completion. Another corrupt officer removed from a position where he could harm the
system
soldiers
failed
he was
her.
supposed to protect. The arrests continued through the night. By
Alex,
dawn,
I
the
can make
entire
sure you
network
spend
had
the
been
rest of your
dismantled.
life in a federal prison.
Weapons worth $47 million were recovered. Bank accounts containing $23 million in illegal proceeds were frozen. And evidence was secured that would ensure lengthy prison sentences for everyone involved. Aftermath. 6
I'm
months
scared.
later, the trials were
But I'm
making
trusting
headlines
you with
across
this.
the country. Colonel James Steele was convicted on all charges and sentenced to 30-5 years in federal prison. His co-conspirators received sentences ranging from 5 to 20-5 years. Captain Maya Rodriguez received a commendation for her cooperation with the investigation and was promoted to major. She now serves as the head of procurement oversight at a base in Virginia, where she ensures that equipment meant for soldiers actually reaches them. Sergeant First Class Oni Blake retired with full honors after testifying at Steele's trial. He now works as a consultant, helping the military identify and prevent procurement
Target
fraud.
acquired.
Major Jennifer Hayes was recalled from Alaska and appointed to lead a new task force focused on investigating corruption within military supply chains.
FBI.
Her first act was to establish protections for whistleblowers who report irregularities. And Alex Thompson? She vanished as completely as she had appeared. No final report. No testimony at the trials. No record she had ever been at Fort Cactus.
Colonel
The
Steele.
FBI agents who arrested Steele
This
found
court
no
sentences
trace of
you
the
to
woman who had made it all
25 years.
possible. But in the secure briefing rooms where military intelligence operations are planned, in the Pentagon offices where procurement oversight is discussed, in the quiet conversations
want to
between
prevent
officers
anyone
who
from
understand that
getting access to our
integrity
network.
is the foundation of military service, they all know the story. They know that somewhere out there, the ghost is watching, waiting, ready to materialize when the system fails to police itself, ready to protect the soldiers who depend on their leaders to do the right thing. Some say she's a myth, a legend created to keep corrupt officers in line. Others swear they've seen evidence of her work at bases around the world. Corrupt commanders suddenly exposed. Criminal networks mysteriously unraveled. Justice delivered by someone who doesn't officially exist. Colonel James Steele learned the truth too late. The ghost is real, and she's always watching. They called her the ghost. And now everyone knows why.